Welcome back to Catalyst University. My name is Kevin Tokoff. Please make sure to like this video and subscribe to my channel for future videos and notifications. In this video, we're going to be discussing the diagnosis of DeQuervain's Tenosynovitis. But before we get into that, let's do a brief review of the relevant anatomy here by taking a look at the anatomical snuff box. If you look right here at the figure where my mouse is, you'll see the anatomical snuff box. The snuff box is really just a space that's made apparent by the tendons that go around it. To better understand that, let's take a look at a real-life image. So right here you see this little depression, and this depression is made apparent whenever these tendons kind of bulge out. And the way that you make them bulge out is you basically flare all your fingers apart. Try to increase the distance between all of your digits. And you'll see on the radial side of your wrist, so the thumb side, you'll see a couple of large tendons that poke out, and that space between them right here, this is the anatomical snuff box. So what are the boundaries of the anatomical snuff box? The more dorsal boundary is up here. This one is the tendon of extensor pollicis longus, which you can see right here. And then for the more palmar boundary, there's really two tendons, and those are right here. Those are the tendons of extensor pollicis brevis and abductor pollicis longus. Now, with the palmar boundary, you can see it better in this picture right here. The one that's actually on the border of the snuff box directly is extensor pollicis brevis. However, sometimes we consider both of them in the boundary because the tendons are so close to one another that you honestly can't differentiate them right here at the snuff box. Okay? So what's contained in the snuff box? Well, there's three major structures that actually pass through this. Number one, we have the radial artery, which we can actually see right here. We also have the superficial branch of the radial nerve, which is the sensory branch, and then also the cephalic vein, which you see right here. The cephalic vein is a superficial vein that drains blood from the radial side of the hand, the radial side of the forearm, and even to some extent the radial side of the brachium. Okay? So it's a large network of veins. Now, even though the extensor pollicis longus tendon makes up one of the boundaries of the snuff box, it's actually these other two tendons, extensor pollicis brevis and abductor pollicis longus, that tend to be injured in DeQuervain's Tenosynovitis. So what is this condition? DeQuervain's Tenosynovitis is a chronic overuse injury of the tendons of extensor pollicis brevis and abductor pollicis longus. Most commonly, it's those two, although sometimes you can get a little bit of irritation of extensor pollicis longus's tendon. What's the mechanism of injury? Well, it's going to be due to repetitive hand or wrist movements. And you'll see that patients with DeQuervain's oftentimes will be working in gardens for long hours, playing golf or other racket sports. They often lift children or grandchildren up a lot. Okay? The typical presentation will be pain with thumb and wrist motion, especially radial deviation. Now, the abductor pollicis longus is not the only muscle involved in radial deviation, but it is used. And so when you perform active radial deviation, abductor pollicis longus contracts, therefore puts tension on the tendon, and the tendon's already irritated, and so that produces that pain. And you may also see tenderness and thickening at the radial styloid process. Now, I just mentioned that active radial deviation irritates these tendons and causes pain. Well, so too does ulnar deviation, regardless of whether it's done actively or passively. And the reason this causes irritation of these tendons as well is because when you perform ulnar deviation, notice what's happening. You're stretching those tendons. And when you stretch an already irritated tendon, it causes pain. That being said, there are two common special tests used in the diagnosis of DeQuervain's Tenosynovitis, and those are Finkelstein's test and Eichhoff's test. We're going to be looking at Finkelstein's test first, but understand that these two tests are performed identically except for one difference. Finkelstein's test is done actively by the patient. Eichhoff's test is done passively by the therapist. To perform Finkelstein's test, the patient's going to be sitting, although theoretically they could do this in any position. And while gripping their thumb with the other four digits, the patient's going to perform active ulnar deviation, like you see here in the clip. So grasping the thumb with the other four digits, and then while maintaining that, perform active ulnar deviation. Now what is this test doing? Well, this picture over here that we saw before literally is a pictorial representation of Finkelstein's test. When they perform ulnar deviation like this, it puts a stretch on those two potentially irritated tendons, which are the tendons of extensor pollicis brevis and abductor pollicis longus. And so if they are irritated, this ulnar deviation stretches them, and then that causes pain, producing a positive test. So a positive test is going to be pain provocation around the anatomical snuff box, as long as it's their familiar pain. Grasping the thumb like this puts an additional stretch on these tendons as well. As we mentioned before, Eichhoff's test is performed identically. So the patient's going to be sitting with their hand over the edge of the table like you see here. They're going to grasp their thumb with their other 4 digits, but this time the PT is going to passively move their wrist into ulnar deviation. So let's take a look at that. So grasping the thumb with the other 4 digits, same thing as before, but now the PT is going to passively move their wrist into ulnar deviation. And again, a positive test is going to be provocation of their familiar pain around the anatomical snuff box. And the mechanism is the same, it's just passive. You're putting a stretch on these tendons of extensor pollicis brevis and abductor pollicis longus. So Finkelstein's test is active, Eichhoff's test is passive like you see here in the clip. Now, there are no robust studies that have been done that evaluate the psychometrics of these two tests. However, there was a sort of pilot study that was done right here that investigated the specificity of the two tests. And what they found is that the Finkelstein's test had a specificity of 100%, Eichhoff's test was only 89%. And while 89% is still pretty good, 100% is amazing because there were 0 false positives. Meaning that if somebody tests positive for Finkelstein's test, there's a 100% chance that they have DeQuervain's tenosynovitis. Whereas for Eichhoff's test, if they test positive, there's only an 89% chance. So there's still a little bit of doubt there. So despite the fact that this is a small, non-robust study, it is recommended to use Finkelstein's test in place of Eichhoff's test because Finkelstein's test appears to have better diagnostic accuracy. For Eichhoff's test, there were false positives, as you can see right there, and this is probably because, subjectively speaking, it's a more painful version of the test. And so it provokes more people than it ought to. And that could also result in unnecessary and also unhelpful surgeries, which drives up the cost of healthcare and produces an extensive rehab for people who have those surgeries. In the next video, we're going to go over some exercises to treat DeQuervain's tenosynovitis, so make sure to join us there. Thanks for tuning in. Please like, subscribe, and check out my Instagram for cool science and not science stuff.